promote both team cohesion and making individual employees feel seen and heard by their managers and peers. What have business leaders learned in the past 3 years about which technologies and practices are motivational and informative versus fatiguing or counterproductive? As our moderator for this session, we're joined by Lydia Dishman. Lydia is the Senior Editor of Growth and Engagement at Fast Company, with a unique editorial focus on innovation in technology, ethical economics, leadership, and design. Lydia has written hundreds of feature articles as a business journalist, with her work appearing in Fortune, The Guardian, New York Times, Popular Science, Slate, and many others. Lydia, we're glad to have you back. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I was listening to Adam's presentation, and I feel like I have also many questions that are going to relate to what this panel is going to be speaking about, especially when it comes to motivating employees. As HR and talent leaders in the audience, you've certainly had a front row seat to changing in the workplace over the past 3 years. That is a total understatement, I know. But one of the more surprising trends that I've observed as work continues to evolve is how we've witnessed these sort of twin spikes in both engagement and productivity in the early days of the pandemic in 2020. According to Gallup, it's the gold standard for checking employee engagement. Since it started studying employee engagement, it found the highest percentage of engaged employees it's ever recorded in the US was 36% in 2020. And then it fell to 33 by 2022, and the trend continues downwards with now 31% of engaged employees. Alongside these more recent dips, we've also witnessed the other trends like the Great Resignation and quiet quitting. All this goes hand in hand in record numbers. And it's no surprise then that leaders across all organizations are struggling to retain their best employees. And we've certainly heard plenty around the necessity of beefing up soft skills for managers in particular. I don't like to call them soft skills. You may have heard me say power skills because I think there's nothing soft about them, but they do help make workers feel seen, heard, and valued. And we've also seen multiple tools to measure and monitor the impact of these new strategies to recognize and reward talent. So we're going to be talking about some best practices today and what are the latest tools and tips that these 5 leaders who are working at the intersection of all of this have to discuss with us. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves briefly, and I'm going to start with a personal question. Tell us about a time you recognize that someone made you feel really seen and rewarded. I feel like we're doing a job interview type thing. Tell us about a time. But anyway, Casey, why don't we start with you? You're phoning in from Japan?
I am. It's early, it's late, kind of don't know what time it is, but thank you. I'm Casey. I'm the CEO, one of the founders here at Attuned. We create and provide intrinsic motivation software, so very connected to the last speech. And how you can use that to understand each and every single one of your team members to get an updated GPS to their motivation and to ultimately create psychological safety is what we do. For me, like being an entrepreneur, before I became an entrepreneur, like in all of the weird spikes of my own motivation and the quirks, I think I was incredibly hard to manage. So like the one manager out of all my previous managers that could really understand me was the time. And it was just nice to really feel understood.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's nothing quite like feeling understood, like you're speaking the same language in a sort of way. So thank you for that. Rika?
Hi, Lydia. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here today. I am Rika Gurnani, and I lead the compensation and people analytics teams at Box. For me, it was during COVID. I was working obviously from home. I have twin children. They were toddlers at the time. We're dealing with a lot, took them out of preschool, we're at home. I was working all kinds of hours of the day. I was working Sydney hours while living in Pacific time zone, and working on a couple of M&A deals with the team in Europe. So it was middle of the night meetings and things like that. So I think what was really meaningful for me at the time was just having a manager who really acknowledged that, recognized that, gave me the flexibility to work, start late in the morning so I had to deal with the kids and whatever time, like just really flexible with that. And just, she would do this thing when we had our weekly one-on-one, she would dedicate the first 5 minutes and she would call it real talk. And she would like, okay, real talk time, 5 minutes, tell me how you're really doing. She sent me a care package for me and my kids. So things like that, just little things really were meaningful for me at that time.
Absolutely. And I just had an image of you as the cat in the hat, like juggling the fishbowl and the umbrella while standing on a ball.
That's probably what I look like for those 2 years.
Amazing. Well, you survived and you look great. So thank you very much for being with us and sharing that story. Michael, how about you go next?
Hey everyone, Mike Watson here from Eightfold. I help lead our customer evangelism team here and excited to join you all today. I think when I look back at the times when I was recognized, I think being recognized when I didn't expect it was what really made me feel great about my accomplishments, right? If we knock out something that has a lot of visibility, we all kind of expect to be called out for that. But I think for me, it's those little things when maybe someone calls you out in a team meeting for really helping them, maybe through a personal issue. Sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with work, right? I was dealing with this, you helped talk me through it. I'm dealing with my parents and being, me personally, I have a mom that's going through dementia that's 86. So, if someone knows that and reaches out to me and helps me with that, or maybe calls me out in a team meeting or an all hands for, hey, Mike went above and beyond and went out of his way to recognize and help me with this when I'm not expecting it. When I look back on my career, those were the most impactful to me.
I totally hear you on that. And it's also so important that people recognize you as a human, that, when you are dealing with stuff outside of work and how difficult that juggling act can be, especially as a caregiver. I think that those are some really important moments. So thank you for that story and for reminding us all about the importance of that. Marie, how about you go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Marie Potter. I'm Senior Director of Culture and Development at Getty Images. What is culture and development? We are the team that are responsible for championing the experience and the engagement and the connection and the development of our employees, which includes learning and development, diversity and inclusion, and people analytics. We shape and tell the story of our people. And speaking of storytelling, I'll tell you 3 real fast ones. First one, my background image, I got to share with you. So it's Team USA. It's with the FIFA World Cup, and the coolest photo was just dropped in our Getty Images site with a compilation of all the players. And so I'm very inspired by that right now and why I have that background. It's very bright red, but that's for the team. And you can find your own teams too. So that's my first story. My second one is, Lydia, your question for us around when we've felt seen. And actually, I just have to echo my fellow panelists. It's the little things. I remember an company all hands meeting and talking about our expectations and our goals. And our CEO says, and you have to maintain like a positive attitude as we're going through this. And if you ever need someone to lift you up, find Marie Potter and she'll be the one. And I was like, well, I was not expecting that. I'm glad I was paying attention. Right. But that was so little, but it was so meaningful and it was so touching. And even just when people ask you, how do you think that meeting went? Or what's your opinion on this? I love it when people ask me my opinion on something, because that means they value what I'm going to say. And then third thing, and Mike, this is for you. I love that you shared vulnerably, that you have an aging parent. So do I. And actually from day one connected us with a great resource through AARP around an employee caregiving series. And we are full on in. And so thank you from day one for reaching out and sharing some ideas, because literally just wrote a whole proposal on the services that we're now going to partake in. And so I love these panels and this connection and community, because we get to engage a lot with each other and be inspired. So anyways, Mike, if you want more info, contact me later. I can share with you what I did.
I love this. So you just got that little side piece taken care of as well.
Yeah,
That's
I had
terrific.
to. I was like, I got to jump on what Mike just said there.
No, no, no. That's really good. I mean, I think that certainly there are a lot of sandwich generation people out there where you may be taking care of an aging loved one as well as have responsibility for little ones too. And on top of all that, again, we evoke the image of the cat in the hat, juggling all of the things. So it's an interesting time of life. But thank you very much for sharing that and the information. Last but not least, Tyler.
Hi, everybody. Tyler Weeks. I lead what we call talent analytics here at Marriott. We've got about 400,000 associates worldwide. And the vast majority of them are working in our hotels, parking cars, checking you in, cleaning your bed, your rooms. And so we've got a pretty big task trying to kind of understand what it's like to work here for them, because they're not logging in, they're not spending time on enterprise systems, they're face to face with people all day. So it's really kind of a fun challenge. And understanding if they're engaged or not is tough, because even getting them a survey is hard. So
Yeah.
In terms of a manager that made me feel seen, I have a couple, but the one that keeps coming to mind, it was actually this was years ago. So I'm a physicist by training. One of the things I love about HR is like none of us meant to be here. We sort of like stumble into it.
Amazing.
I had made a career move because I wanted to go solve business problems, and I stepped into HR, and I was kind of like not sure if I'd made the worst mistake of my life.
Or the best.
Or the best. I wasn't sure. It was kind of new, and I had a manager that gave me a really long leash. I sort of put out some proposals and started putting out some ideas, and I was way off on some stuff and probably pretty close on some other things, but he gave me the room to go experiment and try and learn, and without sort of taking my legs out from under me. And that really kind of inspired me and got me roped in. And now I love, really glad I made the change. But it was actually probably a couple managers in that first team that really did that. So
amazing. Well,
yeah.
We're glad you made it, and glad you're here with us today. Thank you so much. I also want to put a pin in this because I want to get to it a little bit later in the conversation. But Rekha, you also mentioned flexibility, and I think that Tyler, you mentioning autonomy or the long leash, as it were. Those are some interesting ways to get people motivated. I always look at them as sort of the benefit that isn't part of the healthcare 401k plan. But, I do want to come back and dig into that a little bit more. But Casey, I want to come back to you first, because I would like for you to set some context with this question from your broader perspective, certainly as you're dealing with clients and then within your own workforce. Can you explain a little bit more about how engaging employees has evolved over the last few years from what you've seen?
Yeah, sure. I think what we've seen and experienced is a couple of things. I think there's one, personalization of it, and then kind of the nudges to help people who are really busy. So engagement software is out there. Lots of people use it. It's a category. It's useful, but it's good at the larger numbers. So seeing that forest or kind of the organizational level. But as you get to the team level and you get to the individual level, the data and the insightfulness becomes less useful with a lot of the technology that's out there. So how can you use it to understand each individual and personalize? That is a trend that we've seen coming up more and more. So you can see personal engagement, and to understand that what motivates or what engages each person is different, right? So if you're asking, hey, Casey, do you get feedback from your manager? Did you see it was valuable? Did it help your work? That might be data I might throw into an engagement software system, but it's not actually what motivates me or intrinsically motivates me. So you get mixed data with kind of the bigger survey. So going towards that personalization, I see. The other trend that we've seen is people are really busy. They get the engagement data back, they have that manager effectiveness dashboard or whatever, and everybody wants to be better, or most everybody wants to be better. They want to help their teams, they want to inspire them, they want to motivate it, but they don't know what to do. They come back and say, okay, your team's not engaged, here's why they're not engaged. Okay, what do I do? So I think that help in using technology to give that nudge at the right timing with the right context, with all of those relationships going on, is the other trend we're seeing, which is incredibly complex. And you probably need a physicist. Well, we do need physicists to actually solve these type of problems. So I think those type of things is what we're seeing trending.
Yeah, well, that actually leads me into the personalization part in particular, because I think that and this was a mistake that I made too, because I'm obviously an extrovert. I get a lot of energy from being in social situations. And if you're going to recognize me, I like to be called out like in public. That's great for me. And it was a revelation when I was sitting next to a colleague who was called out in an all hands meeting. And this person was literally shrinking in their chair. They did not want the eyes on them. So I think, and this question is for all of you, is that not everyone likes to be publicly recognized. And you all told very different stories about how you felt seen and recognized. How best are your recognition efforts working for all types of personalities and also different workplace setups? So I want to go around the room. So Tyler, we're going to go backwards around. Tyler, let's start with you. You're on mute. That's okay, happens every time.
My number one tactic to help people feel engaged is I go on mute and just let them imagine what I'm saying. It's like the ultimate personalization.
Only a physicist could come up with that.
Look, I think there are. Look, I think one of the number one things that I hear people complain about at work is bureaucracy, that there's levels or that there's red tape. And like, I've kind of harbored that like a lot of my career too, of like, oh man, if only it wasn't for the company, look at all the great work we could do. But I do think that there is sort of there's a huge advantage, and there's a reason that we have that, right? Like if you're familiar with Dunbar's number, we only have something like 120 slots in our head to like keep track of relationships around us. And so like, as soon as you're in a company that's bigger than, and half of those are like friends and family. So as soon as you're in a company that's bigger than like 40 people, there's no way.
You're
like,
tapped out.
You can't keep track of every relationship, having every person, and know that somebody doesn't want to get embarrassed in front of everybody versus somebody wants to get likes, sort of public recognition. That's why you have to have managers. You have to have sort of layers of people who are in contact with people, because as much as there's great software out there, there's no software that's really figured out how to be your friend. And that's a thing that I think is way different than like a really convincing chatbot or like that's good at giving you information. It's having empathy and compassion. And I think that's the thing that we like. Even if it's not perfect, we want to feel it. We want to kind of know that it's there, that there's somebody on the other end that's hearing what you're saying. So I think that while I think when I look at like out at the organization, I'm trying to measure the health of the organization, I actually sort of think about it more like a map, not like how each person is feeling and can I have an engagement score, but what's their neighborhood like? Like, what does it feel kind of around them? And I think that's when I think about engagement and how we sort of bring employees in, I focus on the neighborhoods, if that makes sense. So
yeah, no, that's a good perspective. Thank you, Marie.
I was chuckling at the Dunbar comment because Tyler, I'm always like, I know we're on Facebook together, but I'm not going to reach out and say happy birthday for all the 600 connections I have, because I'd be saying happy birthday all day long to everyone. And it is true, like we're built as humans for those closer communities. I love the way you said that, in neighborhoods, Tyler. So fun thing, this morning I woke up to a Slack post. We have this app that posts to our team channel. So I'm going to speak as a manager right now. And it was just a call out to the team. We call it a water cooler conversation. I have a global team. We're all spread out. No one's in the same spot. And it said, ask for your rose, your thorn, and your bud. And so the rose is what's something you're grateful for, is positive right now. The bud is what's something you're looking forward to, or that gives you hope or motivation or opportunity for growth. And the thorn is what's something challenging or stressful right now that you could use more support with. And it's our team. There's 9 of us. It's a small team, but then everyone responds with their rose and their bud and their thorn. And that's a little just team technique, that real life action. We did it today with my team. And with that, I think it really stresses what Casey and Tyler says, is those personal engagements, your neighborhoods, start small and what you can do there. And we all have the opportunity. From a macro side, though, I'll step out into my leadership role within the company. Be really strong partners. So I'm in HR. Really strong partner with our internal communications team, because a lot of what we do around recognition comes in partnership with how communication structures things. Like we have an inside weekly or weekly Inside Getty Images newsletter, and there's deep dives that feature certain employees, and usually those employees are connecting what they do with how they live our leadership principles, with how they utilize our operating principles, with what's the fun things they like to do on the weekend. So there's every week we get to learn about a new employee. There's 1,700 employees, by the way, at our company, and we are global, so that gives you a bearing. Recognition in all hands. We actually have a recognition feature where we talk about folks. We have a leadership award, and that leadership award does come with a monetary reward, and we give it out every month, and it's a sizable reward, and those folks are celebrated with the right across Slack and in all hands. And here's our leadership award winner for the month of July, and we celebrate them. And then a smaller way of celebrating folks is we do a spot bonus award as well, and that's usually just to the individual. There is a monetary component, which varies based on that level of impact, and those aren't talked about on the stage at all hands or in Slack. Those are just celebrated with that person. And usually, for example, our team, HR, we give awards within our team, and we give awards to others that are impacting and influencing the business really well. And so whoever, whatever leader sends that recognition out to that person will have our leadership team on it. And then all of us will respond in kind, and not to just like, here, +1, but it's like, hey, this is how I seen you showing up, or wow, this reward is so well. So it's small, but it's meaningful because it has visibility into it from, I think, people that individual, that recipient would want to be hearing those words from. So lots of different ways we do that. Again, I give you a manager example and then a leader example. But I think you have to have a variety of ways of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you have a variety of people to dish that out to. So
exactly.
Can I make a follow-up comment to that? I'm sorry
Sure,
if I'm stepping out of the thing here, but
you're okay.
I love how you said that. And one little anecdote, and this is a previous employer. We were doing a sort of large scale attrition prediction, sort of like looking at where we can see people are likely to leave the company. And we were using kind of this like neighborhoods concept of not like who's going to leave, but which neighborhoods are likely to have the most attrition. And the single most important factor that we found was, or to predict, was we had at that time a recognition tool where you could go in and just like recognize a peer. And there was some monetary, it was like you give them like $10 or $25 that would go like on a Visa card or something. The teams with the lowest amount of peer recognition were the highest in attrition. It was like the simplest thing out of everything that we could have pulled in. That was the thing that kind of gave us the best temperature of what the sentiment or the engagement was like in that team. So anyway, I thought it was cool that you mentioned that. So
no, that's an important observation. So thank you for sharing it. But we'll proceed back around the virtual room. Rika?
So yeah, what I've kind of +1 to what Tyler and Marie talked about, as a manager myself, I've also had globally distributed teams, and people have different preference. I think it comes down to like really letting people have an opportunity to tell you what they want, and then actually like honoring that and making that known. So what I've done personally is I've had globally distributed teams. I've always had kind of a shared team document where I ask everybody on the team to go in and tell us what hours, what are their core hours that they'll be online. And that way, like, we have everybody, we can find the overlap so that that's the time that we schedule meetings where we all need to be there, whatever, or we kind of know when to find this person if you have a question for them. I asked them to share like their preferred mode of communication. Do they want to be sent a Slack? Do they want a text? Do they want an email? What's their preferred mode of communication? And then one of the questions that we asked there is also about recognition. Like, what's your preference on how you want to be recognized? Do you want it to be public? Do you not want it to be public? And also, like, as I'm getting to every time I have a new person on my team and I'm onboarding them and having those initial one-on-one conversations with them, I try to gauge for that and keep that in mind. Right now, we use a platform company-wide for recognition, which does not really allow for, unfortunately, for public recognition. I wish it actually did more of that, but the way it's set up is, someone will start a board for someone and then invite others to go in and, put a GIF or a note or a message or something funny or whatever, or just congratulate someone. And then it goes only to that person who it's intended for. So unless you're invited to be on this list, you don't actually see it. But we're actually, as we're looking for like new tools to maybe implement in the coming years when we have more budget for an upgraded tool and things like that, that's one of the things I'm looking for. So in fact, I've actually been going through a few demos lately with platforms in this space. And one of the questions I always ask them is there an option for someone to go and select whether they want their recognition to be in the public feed or just from manager to them directly and only they see it. So just kind of allowing people to give that opportunity to tell you what it is they want, not assuming that, and kind of actually like sticking with it and passing that information on to relevant stakeholders, I think is what's worked well.
Yeah. And that's a good one to think on for, things that haven't necessarily worked. Like, it sort of works, but not really. And, we've, I think, all experienced those experiments where, it sounds good and then you try it and then in real life, it doesn't actually quite work the way you want it to. So, Mike, you want to weigh in?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a lot of what's already been said here, right? Moving to a dispersed workforce during COVID, right? We had to find new ways of doing this, right? So we do have awards that we give out on a quarterly and yearly basis around our core values. We think are very, very important. Keep people aligned there. We also started using a tool. It's called Nectar, and I'm sure some of you maybe have used it or have seen it in the past. But that seems to have really good engagement. Where I'm, as a manager, I'm allocated a certain amount of points every month. I make sure to hand those out. People can save up those points. You can use them towards gift cards. We give out points for anniversaries. I remember I just had my 3-year anniversary and I got a substantial amount of points. I think I traded in for a $200 gift card at Home Depot. I was doing some home improvements, so that really helped, right?
That helps.
It did. Didn't cover all the costs, trust me, but it covered quite a bit. But doing those things, and I think the other nice thing about Nectar, what we're seeing now, and I'm sure this is like this with any platform, is if you want to donate your points to a philanthropic cause, you can do that as well. And we're doing some backpack drives right now for kids getting ready to go back to school. So all of us on our team decided, like, hey, for these next few months, I appreciate the recognition. Don't need to give me points. If you're going to donate me points, donate points to the backpack drive in my name, where we can turn that into a financial donation to those philanthropic groups that are helping to serve those folks. So that seems to be working real well for us right now.
I think that's definitely worthy, and I think there's a lot to be said for allowing people to contribute something to a charitable organization, because that makes you feel a part of a larger community, and that's a motivational tactic as well. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I know Casey can speak to this better than I, but I'm curious about when we talk about points converting to dollars or just recognition tied to dollars. That's a really interesting concept. You know, Marie, you mentioned something about spot bonuses. But Reka, I know that you've mentioned that there are recognition is tied to compensation. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so yes, in a way that me as the compensation leader for that function owns the recognition programs. So in that sense, yes, and I've seen it done differently at different companies. And I think that kind of tells you also how the company thinks about recognition, right? So here I do own, the compensation team owns recognition. I've seen it owned by benefits. I've seen it owned by like the HR business partner talent type teams. I've seen it owned by like workplace experience or finance in some orgs and things like that. So it really kind of depends on how the company thinks about recognition. And at Box, we do have the compensation function that owns it. So what that looks like has looked different in different years. You know, when we've had more of the budget to recognize people with those points or those gift cards and just kind of more of the monetary aspects, it's been more kind of figuring out the appropriate, developing the budget with our finance partners, allocating that to different organizations, and then giving them certain guidelines from a compensation perspective to keep things equitable, right? And what are the milestones that we want to recognize as a company, how to do it, what are the process for it, who approves it, and amounts, guidelines on amounts and things like that. And again, globally, different countries have different things that, you know, they value. When we've done gift cards in the past, we can't just have like a vendor that's in the US because that may not be available in other countries. So just kind of thinking about all those things and operationalizing that. More recently, we've had to get a little bit more creative because we don't have those kind of budgets at the current time. And I think many, you know, tech companies are definitely dealing with the same issues. So we've tried to find something where we have a balance between kind of recognizing people, acknowledging their efforts, but maybe not always having the ability to attach a monetary element to it. So things like, I think some of you've mentioned, but those quarterly awards, we do those where we have like a company value that we select for that quarter, and we ask for nominations of who are the people who've embodied that value in that quarter. And those nominations and the rationale, like that people share and everything, that's kind of public. So you still get some recognition that I've been called out, I've been nominated, and there's a pride attached to it. But then, you know, there's usually like one person, you know, put in a pool, and there's either just like a lottery drawn or some sort of selection process, but you know, only a couple people maybe actually get the monetary award. But so we're trying to find that kind of balance between giving people the recognition, but also limiting the spend. So that's the ways that we've, you know, as a comp team, been across the recognition programs. Again, every year, it really depends on what we're dealing with and, you know, what that entails.
I'm going to work backwards a little bit, Casey, because I mentioned intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And can you talk about a little bit about those two things with regard to who might get motivated by a monetary recognition versus somebody who would accept the, you know, sort of quiet pat on the back?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe even in linking it to that kind of last conversation a little bit, I think with recognition and the question about having the monetary link to recognition is the point that you're getting the money, or the money that's coming, it's after the fact. So you've done something, you've been recognized it maybe by your manager or somebody whose opinion you value, and you're being seen, you're feeling valued, you're getting respected. And I think that's okay. And the money part's just nice. You know, it's not connected to that. And going to that extrinsic motivation, usually those are incentives. Usually they're money or some other type of flashy carrot right in front of you, and you're putting it there. And that generally doesn't change performance, except short-term performance and repeatable, simple type of skills. So if you want creativity, you want teamwork, you want a complex problem solving, which is all our normal jobs most of the time, extrinsic motivation, using those incentives before you do something, before the fact, putting money before that activity or behavior, generally doesn't work. Going into intrinsic motivation, so we've identified 11. We actually have financial needs as one of those, and there is a set of the population with 20% of the population. That's the top motivation. That's why they go to work. And that's what is going to continuously give them the energy to go to work. But there's a whole 80% of the population that's not a core driver for them. So I think getting these insights to, okay, what is going to work for everybody and how complex we are as humans in our motivations. It's 1 in a million chance that somebody's going to have a similar motivation profile. And this is the difficulty of being a manager, is usually we're trial and error. Okay, what works with this person? And that's that key to that manager interface. And you have to do those one-on-ones. But the real difficulty is when we're dealing with somebody unlike ourselves, because we can't get out of our own minds, and we just have blind how to deal with that. And going back, and I think this is where technology can be a champion, coming from the software side of things, to get us past Dunbar's number. If I can get a map to 1,000 people, then I can context switch. Even though I'm at 150, I'm at my threshold of who I can remember and what are the motivations.
Well, that's
Casey,
yeah, go ahead.
If it's okay, I'm going to pull a Tyler and a riff off of Casey. I think it's really
great.
interesting that you know what motivates your teams. And I was going to ask a question. I am interested in your answer about kind of how did you gather that data and that information. But I will also tell you, we did something similar. So we have, and it's around technology and engagement. So we utilize Quantum Workplace as our engagement survey platform, and they have a series of recognition tools there too. And their engagement tool, we do a biannual survey. And one of the items we had asked was around connectivity and being in this global hybrid working world we're in. And we asked people, do you feel connected? And we got the survey results back, and some did, some didn't. And then we realized, should we ask them how connected, how important it is to them? So beyond kind of the needs for the business, how important is connectivity to you? And that was really interesting because we got a good sense of, for some folks, as long as they're able to do their jobs, find the right people, they feel connected and engaged that way, they're good to go. And for others, they're like, and I would like some pizza parties with other people. You get this sentiment of social versus the work relationships. And we found actually that more people, they feel pretty good and connected around getting their work done, and they know their way around the business and who to talk to. That's great. That's great for productivity. And yet we still also have a subset of folks, a smaller amount of folks who may need either recognition or connection in a different way. And so the engagement survey, through kind of a little tweaking, we were able to get to that. But Casey, I'm curious as to how you all did it too. And Lydia, keep us honest if you need us to answer another question.
Yeah, we've only got about 8 minutes left, so I want to make sure that that we can get to everything. But it's an interesting point that you brought up, Marie, about the doing the engagement surveys, because Tyler, you said at the beginning, you've got a big part of the workforce that you can't actually survey, or because they're not in front of computers all day. So for the folks in the audience who are dealing with, let's say, hourly workforce or people who are not at computers all day, what are best practices for getting sentiment analysis and rewarding them?
Yeah, so the strategy that we're taking as we move, because we're actively moving over the next few years away from just a single, because right now we do one engagement survey a year, kind of a complete sentence. And that's a huge investment for us, because at every hotel, the HR leader needs to sort of rally people, get them into a room, sit them down at a kiosk or an iPad, and they've got to take time away from work to go do it. So the approach that we're taking is we're identifying and documenting and sort of building an inventory of the moments that matter. So there's certain turnstiles in everybody's workday or month or year that they have to pass, right? So if you want a new job within the company, you've got to apply to it. That's a turnstile that you had to go past. When you get a promotion or a performance review, or you've got to go on and take required training, at each of those moments, you are interacting with something, and we can't waste a single one of those. And so we're trying to kind of capture them all and really just move away from asking you a bunch of explicit questions about your experience and more to kind of an NPS or Net Promoter Score type question, where the context of where we asked it is maybe more important than the question itself. So, that's why in the bathroom or at the grocery store, you've got the smiley faces, and right, you're just even asking somebody, how's your day today? Knowing that I asked them on when they were punching in, in the morning because there's still like a physical machine they go clock in on. If I can ask them there on that screen, or if I can ask them when they happen to be back doing something with their W-4 in the back office on the HR computer and a pop-up comes up and asks them how their day is, that's the place that we're going. And I think for a workforce like ours, where we have a massive digital shadow internally, that's how you have to do it. You've got to take advantage of every moment that matters to them and insert opportunistically just a very low investment, like, how you doing? And that's anyway, that's how we're
And there's
getting
and
there.
the smiley faces, like where you
Exactly. Make it simple, because even in the US, we have, every time we do something, we've got to translate to 60 languages because English isn't a primary language even for all of our hourly workforce. So we've got kind of layers of complication that we've got to get around.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, when we're talking about the spend and how to remove the friction, when we are thinking about recognizing and rewarding, Mike, I wanted to ask you this one. It seems like learning and development is a way that some organizations are using to recognize and reward their talented people. Can you talk a little bit about how that works where you are?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have inside the Eightfold platform on the talent management side is Project Marketplace, right? And our whole thing is we want to become a skills-based organization, and we want to help you gain the skills you need selfishly for us, but also for you in your career, right? We realize that you're probably not going to work for us for 35, 40 straight years like my father did with one company, right? That paradigm has shifted. So yes, we want to upskill you for some of the needs that we have as an organization, but we also want to upskill you to make you more valuable and more attractive in the market, right? So by having this, what we call Project Marketplace, and if I'm a manager and I need help with a certain project, I can go on there and create this project, and I can say it's 5 hours a week. Here's the skills you're going to gain. Here's the duration it's going to last. It saves me money, so I'm not having to go out and hire a contractor or a third party to come in, right? I'm building those connections with some of our best people and the people we want to keep by including them, right? So it's cutting down on that, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, I'm leaving the organization because I don't see any future here, or I'm not learning anything, right? So we're really opening those doors. You don't have to go and ask permission from your manager, right? We think you're all mature, or else we wouldn't have hired you to manage this with your regular workload. So that's one of the ways that we're tackling this, and a lot of our customers are also tackling this, right? We have a very large pharmaceutical company that's using our Project Marketplace to do just that, upskill their folks and make sure their best people aren't walking out the door.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a strategy, and the investment, I guess, has its own return on investment if your workforce is as skilled as they can be. Again, I want to watch the time here, and I have to ask the question around AI, because I know that there are plenty of workers across all levels of organizations and all types of organizations that maybe they're not like laying awake at night thinking I'm going to be replaced by a robot, but there is certain level of anxiety, especially as we've seen, so many layoffs in various different organizations, not just in the tech industry. So my last question to you is there a way to tie recognition and reward to assuaging the fears, low level though they might be, that a workforce would have, that they would be replaced by AI and automation? So we're going to do a quick round robin. Casey, I'm starting with you, putting you on the spot.
Yeah, that really is on the spot. My instinctual answer would be no, in terms of, recognition and awards to assuage that, because that fear is for the future and the uncertainty of the future. And I don't think any responsible leader is to say, hey, your job is safe, it's not going to be replaced by AI in the next 2 or 3 years, or most people are not saying that. And there certainly are jobs to do it. So I think anything creative, anything dealing with humans or interrelationship type of thing, those positions will be safer. If it's a repeatable task, then those will be more difficult, right? And where you would put the recognition into those components to either reassure this sector of it or try to help somebody learn new skills and move them over here is where the challenge will be.
Yeah, for sure. Reka?
Yeah, I mean, I guess hasn't really been top of mind yet, but I don't know if I would necessarily say using recognition or rewards to reduce that fear or assuage that fear, but more about giving recognition or rewards to help employees when they do upskill. So that's going to help them when, if this ever happens and their jobs are in jeopardy, that they're prepared to, apply skills somewhere else. And so constantly encouraging that, rewarding that, and recognizing that would probably be the way I would go think about it.
Right. Mike, you already talked about the L&D portion of this, but go for it.
Being an AI company, right? And I'm a former customer of Eightfold, so I was on the TA side for 25 years. I implemented this technology in 2018 and 2019. So it's not so much rewards and recognition, but one of the things I told my recruiters that I was interviewing to come work for me at the time was I was going to give them that next set of skills that was going to keep them employed for the next 25 years. When I came into recruiting, we were still using newspapers. That's how long ago it was.
Oh, wow.
And then there was a big shift to online where everyone is using LinkedIn. Well, now it's a shift to using AI. The faster AI is not going anywhere. It's here to stay. So the faster you can get on board with that and learn some of the new skills and traits, you're just setting yourself up in the future. And so that's one of the things that I'm building into my conversations with candidates and new hires when they join my team is, hey, I'm going to arm you with the skills that you're going to need for the next 25 years to be successful. So I guess it's a form of recognition, right? Recognizing where they need to go in their careers, but being very transparent with them and offering them the world when it comes to upskilling and making sure they're marketable in the future.
Marie, briefly, since we're just a little bit over time.
+1 on leaning into the fear and learn. And my best example is, if you've seen the Hidden Figures movie or heard the story about the NASA scientist, this woman, Dorothy, had to learn the programming language for the IBM computer being installed. And instead of being fearful, she adapted, and it's a true story, adapted, learned, and brought her team along with that. That's what we can do for our teams in AI, is adapt, learn, and be at the forefront of that versus being the recipients of the unknown.
Amazing. Great example. Tyler, take us home.
Yeah, look, to me, AI or data science in the workplace is like special effects in a movie. You only notice them if they're bad. And so I think, if you're watching a movie, you give into the conceit. You just believe that person's flying for a moment. And I think if you look at where you're using AI in your daily life, nobody's saying, I'm going to use AI to get directions to the restaurant. I'm going to use AI to find a movie tonight. You just go to Netflix, or you go to the map app on your phone. And so I actually don't think that there's much of a sort of incenting and convincing people that this is a thing. I think the burden is on us to show them value, right? And to sort of bring them a thing that doesn't feel like a robot. It feels like a task that they had to do anyway, and it just made it really easy for them. And if you've won, you've done it right. If they don't call it AI, if they call it whatever, like
the thing,
the thing, then like you've sort of brought them along. So I maybe have a little bit different sort of perspective than your question was looking for, but
no, that's great. I think that, if we normalize it, then it becomes like Kleenex, like Xerox, like Googling for all of those reasons. So that's great. Anyway, we are well out of time. So thank you for indulging me. Mike, Reka, Casey, Tyler, Marie. Thank you so much for being with me. Steve?